Before we introduce her, I want you to hear this word from Scripture. It's the first letter of John, the 4th chapter, beginning in the second half of verse 16. God is love, and those who remain in love remain in God, and God remains in them. This is how love has been perfected in us, so that we can have confidence on the judgment day, because we are exactly the same as God is in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear expects punishment. The person who is afraid has not been made perfect in love. We love because God first loved us. If anyone says, "I love God," and hates a brother or sister, he is a liar, because the person who doesn't love a brother or sister who can be seen can't love God who can't be seen. This commandment we have from him: those who claim to love God ought to love their brother and sister also. The word of the Lord. Ragghi Rain is our guest speaker this morning. She comes a long way, and our district superintendent's going to introduce her, but I had the privilege of hearing her speak Friday night at a clergy dinner, yesterday at a workshop here at the church, and I've really been delighted in getting to know a bit more of her. She's a good friend of our district superintendent, Her Holiness Carol Lakota Easton. Is that to kiss your ring?
This is number 16.
There you go. And she's going to introduce Ragghi to us.
Hi, everybody. What a joy it is to bring to you one of my dearest friends and colleagues in ministry, Ragghi Rain. She's flown in from Delaware, was here for a couple of other events this weekend, and is staying in our home on our living room couch. And we've been staying up late and getting up early and having a wonderful time. With memories, preparing for these things, but also preparing for things that Ragghi and I do together. We have a program we do with young people called Peg Leg Flamingos. That should perk your interest. It's for American Indian youth, and it is a 20-plus-year-old program in which we gather young people from across different reservations and urban communities together to develop skills, healthy lifestyles, communication skills, and to develop a network between them, which Ragghi devotes her life to keeping young people connected. She also works with youth of the Nanticoke Nation where she lives. Although she herself is a Cherokee woman, she has been for 30 years the youth worker among the youth of the Nanticoke tribe. So my dear friend who carries the Lord Jesus Christ in her heart, who has served the church as a General Board of Global Ministries missionary for a few years when that program was possible, but has continued to serve the church as a volunteer for many, many years. My dear friend, and prepare to be touched, and as I told the clergy, prepare to be amazed, Ragghi Rain.
We need to welcome all my relatives. It is so good to see you today. Can you try that with me? Can you say back to me, we need to? Yes, it is so important to learn one another's language. Because the language that God gave to each of us was a gift. And if we deny language, then we deny that that person is a gift from God. And so wherever we go, we try to learn the words of the people. And so I guess I would say, hello. How you doing? But let us begin. There was a nice, nice couple, and they went to a very nice church, perhaps like this church. One day they had gone to a very nice sermon by a very nice minister, and they were driving home in their very nice car to their very nice neighborhood on their very nice street in their very nice house. And they went inside, and it had very nice furniture, and they shared a very nice meal. And together they did the dishes. And then her husband, who was a very nice man, went into the living room, sat down to read a very nice book. And she was a very nice woman. And she walked to the window and she pulled open the curtain. And she looked outside. It was beginning to snow, and everything was looking so beautiful, so nice. And then she saw something. Down the road came two shiny SUVs. They were really nice. And they pulled into the driveway right across from her very nice house. It was another very nice house. And in that very nice house, they lived a very nice man who was a very nice soldier, who was a very good husband and father. He was away at war. And the very nice woman, who was a very nice nurse and a very nice wife and a very nice mother, was raising their three very nice little girls. And so the woman was very surprised that two SUVs had pulled right in the driveway, and she watched. Like many of us, the 8 men got out. They were dressed very nice. They looked very nice. They went straight to the very nice door. They knocked. The door opened. They went inside. The door shut. The women watched. And then the door opened. And out came the very nice men. And they were carrying the furniture. And they walked to the curb, and they set the furniture down. And they went back. They came back out, and they carried the furniture, and they set it on the curb. And the last thing they carried out was the very nice children and the very nice wife, mother, nurse, and they set them on the curb. And they went back to the house and shut the door, and they nailed it. And they got into their cars, and they drove away. And the snows fell. And it covered the very nice woman. It covered the very nice children. And they stood there. The very nice woman turned to her husband. She said, "Flint, I cannot stand to watch this suffering any longer. I cannot stand to see it before my eyes." He shut his book. He looked at her. He said, "Gloria, do something about it." And she said, "You're right. I will do something about it." She walked to the window. She grabbed the curtain and pulled it shut. And then she sat down and said, "Whew, I feel so much better because I don't have to see the suffering any longer." how many of us have pulled the curtain open and went out the door to help stop the suffering? Or how many of us have pulled the curtain shut so we no longer had to see it? Now, you and I know the teachings of the church has taught us to place our shoes in the direction to go into the world and to be the feet and the hands in the love of God. But do we truly do that? Only you can answer that. And God knows. And that is that. We spend a lot of time looking and learning and trying to change many things that have happened to our people. But it is difficult. We face so many obstacles. I'm going to ask you, how many of you know much about Native people? Today, we're going to talk a little bit about them. Did you know that Native American youth, starting at the age of 10, going to the age of 18, have the highest suicide rate? 4 times higher than the national level. Does that hurt your heart? Did you know that if our youth are living on the reservation, the suicide rate is 10 times higher than the national level? And often done in groups. The curtain has often been shut. As a people, we come together. And we, like you, want to help our youth. We want to have an understanding. What can we do? How can we make a difference? Tell us, young people, tell us. How many of us have asked young people what they think? How many of us had to accept what they think? Even though it didn't go with what we wanted to hear. I'm one of those people. We used to have this wonderful name for our program, and then we needed to change it, and the youth gave us the name Peg-Leg Flamingos. I ask, and I must receive. Yeah, it's not a real pretty name, but it's what they chose. Have you been there? Can you hear them? Can you accept what they say? And put a smile on your face and say, we can do it. Usually not. So we had a major gathering of elders. You're going to hear me say elders because you see, our people, we look at our elders and we listen and we learn because they are the ones who have lived. They are the ones who have the knowledge. And they are the ones that we give the greatest honor to. And so the elders were invited. I was younger then. I was young. And then the youth were invited. And we came together in Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, we gathered together. And we were listening to the elders. And we were listening to the grown-ups. And we were listening to the youth. And we were all together. And you were there. Well, we all came together and we were listening and we were talking and we were listening and we were talking. And the last day came. The last day came before people were packing to catch a plane or to drive. And we were all sitting there. It was the last talking circle. The circle was big. It was filled. The talking stick was there. Only the person who has the stick gets to talk. Everybody else has to listen, and they can't say anything. And the stick had gone around, and people were talking, and it was being heard. And people were talking, and it was being heard. And it came to the last youth. And he held the stick in his hand. And he looked and he said, "Do you want to truly hear what I have to say? Do you want to truly know my heart?" This young man, Geronimo, had something to say. And everyone in the circle nodded. "Yes, we want to hear what you have to say." And Geronimo said, "I know without a doubt that when I walk into a room filled with people who are non-native, that I am less than. That I will never become who God intended me to be, because I am less than. I know that by the way that I am treated." And then he put the stick down. Many of you are probably thinking that we all leaped up at one time and embraced this young man and told him he was wrong. He could become anything he wanted to be and what God wanted him to be. But no one moved. No one spoke one word to this young man, because at that exact moment, from our elders to the young ones, we all remembered that defining moment that taught us that we were less than. And we would never be what we were intended to be. Do you know how crushing that is? To know your entire life that you'll never be because of who you are. I remembered that moment. I was a small child when it happened. You see, my daddy worked for a company that hired people that couldn't get jobs because of the color of their skin. My daddy drove a truck cross country for a company that hauled high explosives, nitroglycerin, TNT, and black powder. They didn't have any benefits because they knew they was going to blow up one day. And they weren't about ready to take care of their families. My daddy would leave on Sunday afternoon. He'd always say, "Hope to see you in the funny papers, kids." And he'd head out the door. He wouldn't come back until Sunday evening because they worked them hard. There was a lot of stuff they had to do with that job. Well, I was sleeping in the little place on the side of the wall with my sisters. And we heard the tires hit the dirt. And we knew that Daddy was home. And it was late. And the door opened. And the door shut. And then we heard something else. We heard my mama saying, "Don't, Lone. Lone, don't do it. Lone, please think of the children. Don't do it, Lone." And we couldn't hear what Daddy was saying. And we started hearing all this noise. And we heard Mama crying, "Lone, don't. Don't do it." And the drawer opened and it slammed shut. And then we heard bang and bang and bang. And as a little child, just think of what your mind is thinking of what's going on in the other room. And you're all scared and you don't know what to think or what to do. And you don't know what's happening. But you can hear the noise going on and on. The next morning, we got up and we walked down that little hallway into that place. The place where we ate our meals. The place where we did our homework. The place where we sewed. And there it was. There on the wall. I still see it. There on the wall was a sign that somebody had put in the seat of my daddy's truck. An old beat-up pickup. And the sign had 3 lines to it. It simply said, "No dogs, no Indians allowed." No dogs, no Indians allowed. My sisters and I saw that sign every day of our lives. And that sign taught me quite a few things. It taught me that dogs were higher than me. Because me and my sisters and my daddy were Indians, and so we were underneath the dogs. It taught me that we weren't allowed to be places because of who we were. It taught me that I was less than. And I could never be anything because I was less than. My daddy taught me how you move through the city streets. You moved up against the wall. You kept your mouth quiet and your head down. And you hoped nobody ever saw you. That's how you would survive. And never ever go into certain places because you weren't allowed. Because it was no dogs and no Indians allowed. When my daddy died, my older sister, who's quite a bit older than me, who I call Sister Mama, walked into the room. She pulled the sign off the wall and said, "I had enough of that sign." But you knew that that sign was still there. And she sent it with my daddy. I see the sign a lot. I got married, and I didn't have a sign to put on the wall. But I taught my children without words, by my actions, that they were less than. You see, that action is so much more powerful than words. The work that's been set before our feet is to walk and to teach all people, all children, all youth, that they are valued. No matter the color of their skin, no matter the texture of their hair, no matter the choices that they choose in life, they are valuable and they can learn to fly and become all that they were meant to be. But you see, it can only happen when you and I join together, take the hands of one another and believe it, and see each other as God's children, our brothers and sisters that He created us to be. And if we don't do that, the world will continue to have those who are less than. Not because God intended it, but because man intended it to be like that. And the skyrocket of death among our youth, death among all people, will continue until you and I take the hands of one another and walk together. And not just by words, but by actions. I'm going to ask you, how many of you are willing to walk and make this world a better place? It's real simple, but you got to do the work. The next time you are with somebody and they speak another language, you just lean over and say, "Baby, tell me how you say it and teach it to me." And then you do it. And you fight the people that say, "English is the language of this country," because that's putting somebody down. And besides that, it's not the language of this country, is it? Come on. If we're willing to do the work, I'm willing to do the work. My shoes are ready. My feet are ready to walk. And that is that. Don't get up. One more thing. Are you ready? Elijah the prophet, the master of miracles, would often walk in the village in some type of disguise. This way, he could watch how we treated each other. He could listen to how we talked to each other. He would come back and test us. One day Elijah was dressed as a beggar in dirty torn clothes, mud upon his skin. His hair was gnarled and matted, and he came into a village and he walked among the people. He saw how they looked at him. And then he heard that there was a wedding going on in a house. And so he went to that house. He knocked on the door. The father of the bride opened the door. Seeing this nasty beggar, he said, "You are not welcome. Leave." What could Elijah do? But the beggar had to leave. So he left. But no sooner had he left than he returned. And this time he was dressed in a fine suit of clothes, a silken vest, a top hat, a golden-handled cane. He came to that same house and he knocked upon the door. The father of the bride opened the door, seeing this elegant gentleman who was rich. He invited him in. He gave him a seat of honor. The food was placed upon the table. The wine was poured into the goblets. The blessings were said. The people were hungry. They began to take the food. Elijah was hungry. He began to take the food. He grabbed 2 hands of mashed potatoes and rubbed them all over himself. He remembered he liked gravy. He pulled off his top hat, dumped it in. Whoosh, then he thought about, he was still hungry. He grabbed roast beef, shoved it in and out of his buckets. He filled his boots with vegetables. Some of the children were watching this. They wanted to copy, but their parents wouldn't let them. And then he lifted the wine, and he dumped it all over himself. The father and the bride had had enough of it. He stood, he said, I invited you in. I gave you a seat of honor. You are ruining my daughter's wedding. Pray tell me, why are you doing this? Elijah stood. He looked around the people. He said, it is simple. When I came here as a beggar, you tossed me out. When I returned as a rich gentleman, you ushered me in. You gave me a seat of honor. I am the same person. All that changed was my clothes. And since you welcomed my clothes to the feast, why should my clothes not be fed the feast? And when the people heard this, their heads hung in shame. And when they lifted their eyes, Elijah had disappeared. All that he left was his golden-handled cane. His golden-handled cane. Do you know why he left his cane? Because it was a sign to all people. I was here. Remember the lesson that you have learned. You see, it is said within the book that you read and you teach from, treat others the way you want to be treated. Have you heard that? My father said, a fool sees a man's appearance, but a wise man sees their spirit. How many of us see the spirit of the people and not their appearance? How many of us see beyond the tragedy of someone's life and do not blame them for their tragedy? How many of us see the spirit of somebody we don't agree with within their life, but understand that they are still God's child? It is not our place to judge. There is only one to judge. And so today, I thank you for listening. I thank you for hearing that which was taught to me, that I share with you. I thank you for understanding that life is not easy for those who are different. Life is not easy for those who have been taught that they are less than. And I truly pray for all people who feel this way, that one day they will know that they are worthy and just as important. And I wait for that day for my own children and for myself, and pray that my Father found the peace that he was looking for when he crossed the 4 rivers and built his fire in the sky. And it is finished. Wado. Anishi. Thank you.
Thank you, Ragghi.